to the Voices Summertime Stories and Music. Woohoo! I cheer because we are making history here, guys. This is the first time, and 52 years later, when Mountain Fair celebrates 102 years, we're going to celebrate our 52nd years of the Voices Summertime Stories and Music. So this is co-presented by Voices and Carbondale Historical Society. And when Stephen Shapiro, the president of the Carbondale Historical Society, approached me with this idea, I thought we only need to find a day that it doesn't rain. Then we can put a beautiful program together. And thank you so much. What a turnout. Thank you. And what better way than to start this new series, this new Voices program, than to have 5 extraordinary women, each a pioneer in their own right, each a mover and a shaker, to make the community and the world the way they envision and the way they believe in. And I would like to just tell you that history doesn't have to be dusted or forgotten. History could be enlivened. It could be celebrated. It could be right here, right now, as we speak, as we breathe. So I would like to thank the board of the Carbondale Historical Society for saying yes, even before you know what's coming up, for supporting this program. I want to thank my musical collaborator extraordinaire. Where are you? Who is going to come in strolling with this instrument that many of you might be singing for the first time. Ready? This is called the nyckelharpa. It's a Swedish instrument. It's one of the oldest instruments, and she plays so beautifully. I'm so grateful she's here. And I want to thank Simon Cox on the sound and Jennifer Johnson from Circa 71 Productions, who is going to make today's performance into the August episode for the Voices Radio Hour, which is a collaboration between Voices and Circa 71 Productions. Thank you so much. And I want to thank Combi Language Solutions for providing the service. From now on, you can always listen to the Voices program in English as well as in Spanish. And I want to thank all of you for being here. And without further ado, here is Kathleen Wiley, who so thoughtfully put together and curated this program that you're going to hear.
Hello, and hello all the way over there. Thank you for being here. Today we will hear stories from 5 remarkable women who have shaped, loved, and honored this beautiful place that we all call home. Throughout all of their stories, you will hear a common theme of the deep call to build a life in Carbondale and the Crystal River Valley. As many of us have experienced our own version of this calling, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the people, the first people, who lived in and loved this valley. The Ute people could not imagine land ownership except by Mother Earth. Only when times became so dire did they rise up in Meeker to reject the European way of life. This action was used as an excuse to remove the Utes from their granted territory, as defined in the Kit Carson Treaty of 1868. We open our time together, acknowledging the land, the mountains, and the rivers, as well as the original caretakers of this land. We are gathered on unceded territory of the Ute Nation. and acknowledge their wisdom in caring for and learning from this land. Recognizing that each of us here are continuations of parents, grandparents, ancestors near and far, we invite the complexities of our time, our histories, our emotions and perceptions into this space. We open ourselves to the healing of sharing our stories. Please join me in welcoming our storytellers for the evening, Charlotte Graham Whitney, Amy Kimberly, Andrea Monique Peña Harris, Jeannie Perry, and Lori Loeb. Lori Loeb, known as the Mother of the Fair, founded Mountain Fair in 1972 and later started and has facilitated the opening drum circle for the past 25 years. Growing up a tomboy in a culturally Jewish family, Lori lived a life as a musician throughout the USA, held various jobs abroad in a variety of developing countries, and taught workshops combining hand drumming and personal growth. She has also taught management of volunteers for nonprofit organizations and has been an administrator in the arts, human services, and higher education. And now, Lori Loeb with Town Mothers Rise Up.
Good afternoon. So good to see all of you here. I first came to the Valley in the summers in the mid-1950s to play in the Aspen Music Festival. I was on track to become a symphonic percussionist, and this was a real highlight to be here. I loved the small town and the mountain life, so much so that after being here for a few summers playing in the festival, I decided to move to Aspen in 1961, full time. The mountain lifestyle, the cultural activity, the unconventional people all totally enthralled me. And the degree of civic engagement. Why, I even worked on Hunter Thompson's campaign for sheriff. By the mid-60s, though, I could see the changes that were coming. Aspen only had 750 people in one paved road, but absentee ownership was beginning and there were changes coming. So I knew I wanted to get out of there. So I looked around and by golly, I found Carbondale. Only had 600 people and no paved roads. I had an opportunity to buy a piece of property here for next to nothing, and I really liked the modesty of the town and the friendliness. So as soon as I came, right off the get-go, I started going to town council meetings because I didn't want to see what was happening in Aspen happen here in Carbondale. In 1977, the Colorado Rocky Mountain School annexed a portion of their property into town and had it zoned commercial. In '99, they sold 24 acres of that to a California wannabe developer. And he subsequently proposed a big box style development that would have had 252,000 square feet of building with an anchor building without a specified retailer, an anchor building that was actually bigger than Cypress Park, if you can imagine that. There were about 2+ years of negative input from the townspeople, but despite that, in 2003, The town fathers, i.e. the council or trustees, approved the development. Well, having been a trustee myself in the early 80s, I knew there was a channel through which we could fight this. So a few friends and myself decided to form the Town Mothers because we didn't think the Town Fathers were doing justice to the will of the people. We wanted to preserve the small town character and come up with a better way that was more fitting for Carbondale to develop economic growth. We circulated petitions which forced a referendum. Now at that time we had a new town manager and he had been told by a colleague in the planning field, in Carbondale, keep the government out of the way of the people. Boy, did he see what was coming. The developers had a display center on Main Street in what's now the Brass Anvil. And in the display center, they had renderings of their proposal. They had a building that had a solid brick wall 2 blocks long, not a window or a door in it. And it had the logo of a Target on it, even though no retailer had committed to the town. Their rendering showed a small building with big trees and big people. It really wasn't very accurate. The developers came from a kind of a shady background. One of them was a board member of a company that was under federal investigation. And their campaign was based on fear. They said, if the town will go broke if we don't have increased sales tax revenues. And they threatened there will be higher taxes. There was negativity and divisiveness. They pitted people against one another. This was not the Carbondale way. We had always been able to have constructive discussion amongst differing opinions. There were even campaign sign stealing going on. The Town Mothers campaign, on the other hand, was very lively and very creative. We had a display center right across the street in a donated hair salon, and we called it the other side of the street, the other side of the story. And in it, we had architects, models. We had so many volunteers working on this campaign, so architects donated models. There was an aerial photo of town, and we overlaid a template of the proposed development, and it covered the entire downtown. We had a replica of their rendering, and we overlaid it with a picture of Carbondale-sized people and Carbondale-sized trees, and our overlay was to scale. We sat in salon chairs and greeted people and had discussions. We used a visual depiction of anticipated traffic that would be generated by this development, and if you had lined up the cars bumper to bumper, they would have stretched almost all the way to Redstone. One of the Town Mother's spouses made Carbondale Mother Lovers hats. We had posters around town. We used canning jars around town for donations. We had clothespins. These were our campaign buttons. Clothespins stamped with Town Mothers on them. And we wore aprons in the July 4th parade. The developers, on the other hand, funded a great big fireworks display on July 4th to try to garner support from the townspeople. Frank Norwood wrote a song, a wonderful song about big box development, and it played repeatedly on KDNK. We spoke on talk shows on the radio, And a videographer from Denver who loved Carbondale made a gratis production for us that showed Sopris looking across the hayfields up on White Hill, and all of a sudden, boom, a great big cardboard carton drops out of the sky onto the hayfields. We had a banner that said, "Don't try to change Carbondale, let Carbondale change you." We had an email list that was that hosted very lively discussions and disseminated a lot of information. We held educational events on taxation and on the importance of maintaining Main Street. The Denver Post covered us, and there was massive coverage from local papers in the valley. Our name helped because it's not cool to badmouth mothers. Jimmy Ibbotson of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band played a fundraising concert for us at Steve's Guitars, and there was the largest audience that has ever been in Steve's. We raised, all in all, $18,000, which at that time was big bucks. And the developers tried not to reveal how much they had raised and spent on their campaign, but by law, they had to. And I don't remember how much they spent, but we got better bang for our buck. With our funds that we raised, we hired a local advertising pro, Michael Chandler, and he created a bunch of ads for radio and TV. We also ran a lot of ads in the Valley Journal, which was the predecessor of the Sopris Sun. And one of them was a full page giving reasons to vote no against this proposal. It said, "Mom says, I need to know your friends before you hang out with them." The developers wouldn't reveal what their background was in development. Mom also says, "Never buy a pig in a poke." They showed us pretty pictures, but they were misrepresentations, so we really didn't know what we were going to get. Mom also says, "Never bite off more than you can chew." The proposal would have just about doubled the available commercial space in town. And Mom says, "Try to work things out." We had had about 3 years of citizen participation, trying to come up with a better plan. But the developers, on the other hand, wouldn't negotiate or collaborate or compromise. That's not the Carbondale way. We wanted to use the phrase "size matters," but we thought better of it. We hired a campaign consultant, which was a really good move, and she emphasized the importance of vote tracking through voter rolls and poll watching. 2 weeks before the vote, by golly, Target announced they were going to Glenwood Meadows. Yeah. We won the referendum, 57 to 43%. It was the largest voter turnout in the entire history of Carbondale. And it included a record number of absentee ballots. People had even sent in their ballots while vacationing in Mexico and Moab. This really emphasized the value of every single vote. Now, cell phones were new at that time. We barely knew how to use them, but we got them. And we did vote tracking. We got voter rolls, and we could periodically update them to see who had voted. Not how they voted, but who had voted. And so we called people who had not yet voted, and we gave rides to the polls. The cell phones came in handy because on election day, we had the poll watchers at the different precincts around town, And we were gathered at our display center on Main Street, and they phoned in the results from each precinct. Of course, we were really elated. We had a celebration right there in the middle of Main Street with bottle rockets. Now, right across the street, the developers had set up a barbecue for their hoped-for victory celebration. But in fact, it was a rather sad celebration. In 2012, there was a subsequent proposal for a Home Depot. Again, there was similar negative input. The developers threatened a lawsuit based on ex parte communication if they didn't get their approval. Now, the trustees knew that if they approved this development, the town mothers would rise up again and there'd be another referendum. But they also needed to avoid a lawsuit. So, very wisely, they approved the development on the condition that it go to a public vote. And guess what? That time, we won 2-1. Following that, there was an Economic Development Roadmap Committee formed, and small group meetings were held around town to get info on what people wanted in terms of growth and development. There was consensus to preserve the small town character and the agricultural heritage, and never let the cattle drives through town die. The committee recognized the existing assets of the town: the natural beauty, outdoor recreation, the arts, fine dining, and citizen participation, and decided that that was what we really should build upon, not try to become something that we're not. People don't move here to shop. The town blossomed organically after that, because people really valued that we are different, that we don't have the big boxes and didn't go the way of mainstream America. And people really appreciated the emphasis on the arts here and how friendly and participatory the town is. Fast forward 2016, proposed development by a different developer for a city market. No big boxes, just one big store, not the entire parcel, and they promised a flagship store, that this would be the most environmentally sustainable city market in the whole state, and it would be very well designed. Well, we know how that turned out. There was way less opposition from the community. The town mothers were burned out. We were tired after 6 or 7 years of active civic engagement. And unfortunately, nobody picked up the ball of watchdog. So naively, the trustees bought that false bill of goods and approved the city market development. Now we see rampant development, which has changed the character of our town. But fortunately, the heart of the community still remains the Carbondale way. Friendliness, mutual respect, collaboration, creativity, fun, and honoring the natural environment. So come celebrate the Carbondale way in 2 weekends at Mountain Fair. Thank you.
Jeannie Perry has been coming to Carbondale for over 50 years to visit her family and now calls it home. She is a columnist and community activist. Her column, P's and Q's, reflects ontological observations and is featured in the Sopris Sun. Jeannie lives in Satank with her husband and 2 dogs. Please welcome Jeannie Perry with The Ranch House.
Hi. This is a story about women who get what they want. My grandparents, Bob and Diddy Perry, had a working cattle ranch for over 60 years, just down the road. The Mount Sopris Hereford Ranch was just south of town by the fish hatchery. And before that, it was owned by Mr. Grubb. He's the man that introduced Carbondale to the potato. So my father and his 6 younger siblings all grew up on the ranch. Diddy liked to say they raised horses, cows, and 7 children. Over the years, I would visit the ranch. I would stay there during holidays in the summer, Christmas, Easter, Branding Day, etc. And my childhood memories of the ranch are haunted upstairs closets with slamming doors. Could have been the wind, but you never know. And hiding and sneaking Red Hots out of the pantry with my little sister positioned as a lookout. And joining my cousins in the basement for a game of murder in the dark. So the basement was pretty dark with the lights out, but there was a hallway that went to the garage and a cold room off of that, which was earthy. When you walked in, it smelled earthy, and it was full of, big sides of beef, beer, soda pop. And the light switch, it was pitch black in the cold room. The light switch was outside on the hall wall by the door, and so the best hiding spot came with the terrifying prospect of getting locked in the cold room in the dark, and no one could hear you yelling from the cold. When I was 21, I was driving through Carbondale on a road trip to nowhere, and I had dropped out of college and recently pierced my nose, and I was just looking for my next adventure, and I thought, well, I better stop and see Bob and Diddy. So I planned to make a quick visit and then be on my way, but Diddy had other plans. My grandparents were conservative ranchers who rarely traveled and thanked the Lord at every meal. And so when I showed up just for a quick visit, Diddy convinced me to take a photography class at CMC. She said I could live on the ranch, I could live in Nancy's house. It was the first house on the left after you came over the bridge. And all the houses on the ranch had names. There was the big house, the brown house, the corner house, the cook house. Whoops. That was Diddy. So, this was Nancy's house that my Aunt Nancy came to live in when she came back to the ranch after her divorce. And while I was excited to go west and find my new passion, I was kind of getting excited about this new plan. I could see myself as a photographer, living on the ranch, in my own house. It all sounded very adult. And so I agreed. But Bob, my grandfather, had already moved a young ranch hand into Nancy's house, and we couldn't share the 2-bedroom house because we were 2 unmarried young adults, and premarital sex is a sin, and we all know where that leads. And so I was crushed, and I couldn't understand why Diddy would take away something she knew that I wanted when she changed her mind. But looking back, she was only a year older than I was at the time when she married Bob and had my dad, followed by 6 more babies. And it was a different era. There wasn't access to birth control or the morning after pill or abortion as easily. Your life could drastically change just from sleeping with a man. So I've forgiven her over the years. And the next time I came back, like a decade later, now I'm 31, and I'm still unmarried. And Bob and Diddy this time agreed to rent me the cookhouse, which is just a little one-bedroom at the end of the road. So I lived in it alone. I shared it with the mice and the snakes and the spiders. It was like Cinderella when I cleaned the house. They all came out. But then I met a cute boy who was working construction with a cousin, someplace called Satang. And there were sparks. He started coming over to have dinner, watch a movie, spend the night. But that did it. Diddy came marching down the hill. Get married or get out. So I remember Clint said to me, I might want to marry you one day. It's not going to be because your grandma told me to. And I agreed, and we packed up, left the ranch, and moved to Satang. Then my grandfather died. The ranch was sold to a billionaire who proceeded to destroy it, and I mean like tear down and burn every building except for Nancy's house because his foreman was living in it while they built him a new house. And by now I had married the cute boy who worked as a land surveyor, and as fate would have it, he was surveying the foreman's new house, and they struck a deal. If we could be ready to move it on a day's notice, we could have Nancy's house. So they wouldn't have any delay getting their CO, and we would get a free house. Win-win. So we hired Bill Bailey out of Grand Junction. He picked up the house, brought it down 133, and put it into Satang, where we put it on a full basement. We remodeled a little bit, but it still has all the wood paneling, all the fluorescent lighting from its days on the ranch. And of course, now we call it the ranch house because it's the only remaining structure from the Mount Sopris Hereford Ranch. In the end, I got everything I wanted. I got the boy, and I got the house. But Diddy got her way too, because we never lived in it until we were married.
Seeing people start to move with the shades, so if you feel drawn to come a little bit closer, you're certainly more than welcome to. Our next storyteller is Andrea Monique Peña Harris. She is a border girl from Laredo, Texas, and Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas. She is bilingual and bicultural from birth and has been working to help her communities since her high school years. Andrea Monique Peña Harris with La Si Se Pudo.
My story starts when I turned 25. I kind of thought of life as a blank canvas, and only a fourth of my life had even been painted. The rest was completely blank. So I kind of thought either I can paint something that I really am going to be proud of and I'm going to hang it on my wall, or I'm going to shamelessly hide it in the basement. And I didn't want to do that. So I packed 2 suitcases and a carry-on and decided to move here. On February 3rd, 2008, I boarded a one-way flight to Aspen, Colorado, and hoped for something new. I had just visited Carbondale the year before to pick up a cousin of mine that needed a drive back to Texas. And I saw Carbondale Arts and Humanities, and I was like, well, I'm a humanities major and I work in the arts. Could I have found a little town made for me? And then I saw tortilleria and a carniceria. I was like, I'm totally home. It was like the Mary Poppins moment for me, you know, where she jumps into her painting. Andrea Mary Poppins Harris, guys. Growing up on both sides of the Texas-Mexico border allowed me to live in 2 worlds since birth, and Carbondale was going to kind of give me that sense of belonging in 2 places as well. I really hoped to become a bridge between the English speakers and the Spanish speakers around here in some form or fashion. After all, my Tito Ramon and Tita Rosita always told me that I was worth 2 people if I spoke 2 languages. They weren't wrong. So I used my talents where I could. In all honesty though, it was really hard. I was completely lost. I struggled a lot. And I was juggling 2 or 3 jobs at a time. I was trying to figure out what kind of career opportunities I could actually get involved in, and I would literally just print out stacks of resumes and hand them out like candy to managers up and down the valley. And I finally ended up managing the Village Smithy, which was great because I got to connect with a lot of locals. And during the summer of 2009, I was single, I was biking around with my new girlfriends, having a blast. I felt like I was kind of finding myself. I was releasing generational trauma and guilt and all the stuff that I didn't even know I was carrying. And some people back home were saying that like they didn't really think I would last. I wouldn't make it. I would come back home. And hearing that just fueled my fire. I was like, okay, well, and I really got to figure this out. So, of course, like once that happened, I was in a groove. And of course, once you're in your little groove, someone comes to change that. I fell in love with Luke Waldo Harris, a 5th generation Carbondale native with strong ties to this land. He's tall, handsome, intelligent, hardworking, great hugger, everything I ever wanted. He was the yin to my yang, and this relationship was getting serious. Yet he would not even talk about marriage until we moved in together first. I was like, ay, ¿qué hago? I can't do that. Like, it goes against everything I was even, raised to believe. So, I thought about it for a little bit. And you see, my mother, Linda Peña, no de Peña, porque no era de nadie, she had already started breaking down these cultural norms with her strong personality. Una cabrona, and proud of it, you guys. She challenged the submissive role Latina women were supposed to play, and I was doing the same thing. I believe in charting my own path and breaking cultural norms. So I moved in with Luke before he even met my parents. That cultural and Catholic guilt, though, it really stung. Then I remembered I held the paintbrush. This was my masterpiece. And I was going to continue chasing my dreams, not those of my culture. When I met Luke, he would tell me that I wasn't Mexican-American, that I was American because I was born on this side. But then I took him home, and he retracted his statement right away. He's like, you're definitely Mexican. I would always say that I'm culturally Mexican, but educated in the United States. I'm a border girl, not a Texan. I'm a Chicana, Latina, and Hispanic, the labels, right? They go on and on. Shortly after we met, I applied for a Spanish teaching position in a local Montessori school. During the interview, they asked if I could teach English as well, because I spoke it. I was cocky and determined, so I said yes. It was really hard, but I did it. And what I really learned was that students didn't really have a lot of diverse teachers in front of them, and not in the school, not in the environment that I was seeing. And so I really wanted to change that. And I always loved giving back to my community, so teaching was going to become my avenue. Early in our marriage, we lost Luke's father. Then we had two amazing daughters, Olive Rose and Violet Glenn. I quickly became a quieter version of myself, as I happily put my personal desires on hold. At some point, I realized I had lost myself assimilating to this community and to the new role I had in my family. I needed to wake up and invest in myself again, or my daughters wouldn't have the role model that I had always envisioned them to have. So I wanted to specialize in culturally linguistically diverse education. And the only way to do that was to go to grad school. It was terrifying. My mother would always say, "Do as I say, not as I do." But I never agreed. And I was teaching, so I had to be the example for my students and for my daughters. So I applied, and I was accepted. It was hard. I learned a lot, but mostly that a lot of my ideas that I naturally had research behind them. They were research-based, proven strategies to help students. And when I finally finished with a 4.0, I was shocked, surprised. My internal dialogue had always been that it wasn't good enough, right? Like there was always something missing. But this master's helped me join the Roaring Fork School District. It just opened another conversation and another opportunity. And I transferred to the Roaring Fork School District during COVID. I found Bridges High School, and I'm absolutely so glad I did, because I absolutely love this population of students that are so misunderstood. In the last 3 years, I have joined the Carbondale Arts Board, the Carbondale Creative District, and I'm hoping that I can just give back to this community, to help bridge more of these cultural gaps, and to preserve the rich history that my husband's family sowed in this valley after being one of the first settlers here in the 1880s. He too had a lot of strong women leading the way in his family. My purpose, I feel, is to connect people of different cultures and different backgrounds, but with compassion and empathy. Students have taught me that we can change lives through storytelling, listening to each other's stories, through restorative practice. So therefore, I published a book with student stories. Bridges High School students and myself published a nationally recognized book that you can see back there. And it's through We Are America Project. We all need to understand our identities and face the generational traumas that we are holding in order to feel free. So instead of being afraid of trying new things, I'm excited for the learning that will happen in the process. I have slowly stopped allowing others' perspectives and labels to dictate my choices. And I have learned to celebrate my uniqueness, because it'd be really boring if we were all the same. I'm the painter of my story. I created the life I am living, and I have no regrets. I'm just getting started, guys. I now realize that my identity is my superpower, and I'm so glad it can help you guys out.
Kimberly was the executive director of Carbondale Arts for 12 years and the director of Carbondale Mountain Fair for 19. She won the Governor's Leadership in the Arts Award in 2018 and is currently co-producer of the Palisade Bluegrass and Roots Festival. When not working, she can be found adventuring in nature or visiting her 2 daughters and 3 grandchildren. Please welcome Amy Kimberly with The Pivot.
All right. For those of you that know me, I can't stand still, so I might have to be walking around. My story is a story about a love affair that's lasted 20 years and still continues today. It's a story about how a place can change a person and how a person can change a place. And many of you are actually part of this story. Look at all of you. I don't really talk about you, but when I look at all the faces, I feel like this whole community is my story. I moved here from Telluride just for a short amount of time. My daughter was in her senior year at CRMS and we wanted to be together. I was the executive director of the Telluride AIDS benefit at the time. And in that capacity, I had started a project in Africa. And now this was a time where there was a lot of death happening in the continent of Africa as the AIDS pandemic was sweeping across and affecting so many lives. And our project that I started through the AIDS benefit was really making a difference. I mean, I felt like maybe this was my path forward. So, luckily for me, the International Conference on AIDS was being held in Miami that year, and the United Nations was going to be sending me and my counterpart, Palili, who was in Africa, to come speak before the conference. And so I was feeling like my path was going to be in international AIDS work, and I was just going to save the world and make an impact. And it felt like the right path. Meanwhile, I just moved to Carbondale. My house was the historic Quebec house on 3rd Street. So suddenly me and my 2 girls had this big house, lots of room. Nobody knew me here, which was a good thing because the girls hated walking down the street with me in Telluride because, hard to believe, everybody would stop to talk to me, or I would want to stop and talk to everyone. So on our second day here, I was like, let's go out and walk Main Street. We walk out there, I mean, there's nobody on Main Street except for one guy, and many of you might know who I'm talking about, sitting in front of Java Joe's, as it was called then. He was wearing shorts, black knee socks, and black patent leather shoes. Know who that is? Anybody know who that is? That's right. Well, as we're walking down, I put my arms around the girls and I say, isn't this great? Nobody knows me here. When all of a sudden this man stands up, points his finger at me, and says, you taught my daughter sex education. Which, he was kind of right. I did do some AIDS education at CRMS, and you know, AIDS is related to sex, so. But I took it as a sign that my path forward was going to be in this international health crisis. Well, a couple days, well actually, sometimes life has a way of showing you a path that you really didn't think was going to happen. And even though I had landed in this beautiful, quiet little town, the world literally came crashing in. A day before I was set to leave for the conference on AIDS in Miami, I drove Ruby to school, my younger daughter. And I didn't have TV, so I always had KDNK on, and we didn't really listen to it. I dropped her off at school, but then I turned it up, and something was happening. I mean, something really strange was going on in the world. And by the time I had arrived back at 3rd Street, the second plane had crashed into the World Trade Center. I rushed inside, I woke up Zoe, I was like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know anyone here. I don't know what's going on, but get dressed, we gotta go find a TV. The only place we knew of was CRMS. We weren't really sure if there was a TV there, but it so happened there was one TV, pretty small, and the whole student body was all around it, just watching these horrific events unfold. So we watched for a little bit, and then I remembered that my mother had flown out of Boston that morning. And Palili was in Africa at the Johannesburg airport waiting to fly into Miami to meet me. So we went home, and as I entered the house, the phone was ringing. Picked it up, good news. It was my mother. She was grounded in Cape Fear, of all places. And then Palili started calling, what is happening? What is going on? And really, I didn't know either at that point. I was like, I don't know. Hopefully it's going to be all right. Hopefully we're going to be able to fly tomorrow, and the conference will happen and my path will be set. Well, as we know, that did not happen. The conference got canceled and Palili couldn't come over. My mother did make it out of Cape Fear eventually. But I slowly realized that I better find a job. So I had noticed that KDNK had a job posting for a development director. I don't think they called it development director at the time, but I rushed over there and I applied, and they immediately told me I was overqualified and I should go somewhere else to find a job. But I persisted and persisted, and I convinced them that I thought $20,000 a year was just dandy and I would be so happy to work for that. So they did hire me. And this was a time when being in community radio was so crucial. I mean, we are talking about the rise of Fox News, and so much misinformation was running rampant then. And KDNK was like the heartbeat of this community. I mean, I didn't really know many people, and all of a sudden, I had a whole community that was waiting and listening and participating in life. And as the rest of the world was kind of plunging into darkness, well, I was feeling rather giddy. I was like lightheaded. I was having the time of my life. I was falling in love with this town and this community. And you know, it was a really positive thing in a time of a really horror in so many ways. Well, as we waited to see if the world was going to go, or if America was going to go to war with Iraq, when it was officially announced, I was the one that had to get on the radio and inform our community. Amy Goodman in Democracy Now! Was screaming down the pike, pissing everybody off, but also bringing like voices and stories that we had never heard and definitely were not hearing in mainstream media. And music. I mean, music seemed to be at times the only salvation that was happening. And KDNK brought it all. It brought the voices, the music, the hope, and the hurt that was emanating from our world. And I was having the time of my life. I was like, wow, this is an amazing place to be. Maybe I don't really need to be an international AIDS worker. The world had changed so much. I felt maybe I could really make an impact right here in this town. So I never did go back to Telluride. I walked away from everything there. I stayed here. Exactly a year later, I was in Soper's Park for the 1-year anniversary of 9/11 when I would go to events, I'd look around, is there anyone I might date here? I would sometimes ask myself, and all of a sudden I spied a tall man with long blonde hair and white mother of pearl glasses. And, well, the rest is history, or her story as we're saying today. So thank you, Carbondale community. I am forever grateful.
How's everyone doing out there? Yeah, it's nice and cool. I can feel the shade is coming this way, so that's amazing. Charlotte Graham Whitney lived in Marble for 25 plus years. She felt called here for reasons she did not know at the time, to capture stories of ancient ancestors and elders, from the first people, the Utes, to those who come thereafter to the Crystal River Valley between Marble and Carbondale. She gives thanks to the Creator. It is my honor to welcome our fifth and final storyteller of the night, Charlotte Graham Whitney, with Nanama, all together as one, Creator, Nature, and Woman.
All right, well, the first time I laid eyes on the Crystal River Valley, it was about this time of day. There was a shiny, rosy, golden light that was going through the aspen trees, and the leaves were fluttering around and everything, and the light was shining over this beautiful, beautiful, verdant green valley that we were looking at. We were surrounded by snow-capped peaks in July, no less. And ever since then, I've always said, being here is as close to heaven as you can get without checking in. My husband, Doug Whitney, and I had been traveling in our motorhome all over the Southwest and Northwest for a couple of years. We were going to petroglyph sites and learning all about them. Doug was making his artistic renditions of these, and I was researching and finding out more about them, and then also helping him sell his work at the galleries and art shows that we would go to. And a friend of ours, Sandy Messina, was managing an art gallery up in Marble for that summer. And she had been selling quite a bit of Doug's pieces. So she said, come on up to our 4th of July art show. Well, the short story is, we came for the weekend, we stayed for the summer, and then we ended up spending 25 years full-time here. We left behind at our last stop, which was Sedona, because we had been traveling all this time. We had left, of course, the brutal desert heat, and also quite a variety of characters that we had been meeting along the way. And one of them was a mixed blood Quechua Cheyenne elder named David Singing Bear. Oh, Singing Bear. Again, I had no idea at the time, but his appearance in our path ended up guiding the next 25 years of my life. By now, we were getting pretty steeped in the Native American culture, going to all of the places and the sacred sites that we had been going to. And one of the more powerful experiences that I had under Singing Bear's tutelage was a rebirthing ceremony, where I indeed felt myself going through a birth canal. Oh, you mothers out there, I honor you so much. Afterwards, after I went through that, and it was pretty powerful, Standing Bear came up to me and he said, I am giving you this name that came to me, Standing Bear Woman. And then he laughed. He said, but I don't know if that means like a standing up bear or standing bear. He loved to laugh about that one. But it was a pretty clear confirmation when a little boy, about 8 or 9 years old, came up to me and he handed me this carving that he had been whittling during the ceremony. And sure enough, it was a bear standing upright with one paw standing up. He said, this must be for you. Well, when we came back to break camp and we told Singing Bear that we were going to be going to Marble, Colorado for the summer, he just laughed. I said, what? I mean, 100+ degree temperatures here or a cool 68 in the mountains? What's there to talk about here? And he said, well, you're going up to Ute country. They're gonna kick your ass. Oh no. Well, I learned later on that among Native American tribes, and if you've been around Native American people, you know that their humor is a little bit different. And this was a very common saying, like at the powwows and such, about the Ute people. They were, and they are, the bear people, for sure. But even with his prescient warnings, I had no idea what was coming my path yet to come. As little did I know that in the very near future, I would be standing in front of a lot of people that I didn't know, and I would be bearing truths to them for those who, for whatever reason, could no longer speak. And there were certainly some that didn't want that truth known. But again, that was another story down the line that happened, or maybe 2 or 3. A few days after our arrival on Marble, I'll never forget, I was walking down right at the entrance of town, if you've been up there, and there are aspen groves on both sides. And I was just reveling in all the greenery. I mean, the dragonflies and the hummingbirds and the butterflies, and there was just amazing amount of wildflowers like I had never seen before. And they were so tall and everything, and I was listening to all of that, watching it, just looking around, walking. And I was reveling in all that greenery and that cool breeze, that cool mountain breeze, when all of a sudden, I saw a lady, little tiny lady, coming towards me. She had a shawl wrapped around her, kind of hunched over. And there was a little doggy following her on a leash. And as we passed each other, I thought I said hi, or maybe I nodded, or I was kind of just in that glow. And yet, when she passed, I realized that she had said something to me. You're here for a reason. Listen, and it will tell you. What? I mean, I didn't know. I mean, it took me a minute to realize what she said. And did I hear what I thought I heard? So I immediately turned around to look at her and ask her. There was no lady, no dog. There was no one on that road. I retraced my steps right away because I thought, well, maybe she darted in the driveway, or maybe there's a cabin over here or whatever. And no. The only thing that I heard were the birds speaking. I heard the hummers going. I could hear the water. I could hear the voices of nature. But who was this woman? And what did it mean to me? Well, it turns out, I'm a slow learner. For these 25 past years or so, some of those who have come and gone in this valley have been speaking to me. And some have been Ute, and that's been confirmed by some dear Ute friends, Native American friends, as well as some of the other first settlers here. So we can call them ghosts or spirits or whatever. I just eventually began to realize that what I was hearing was voices from ancestors. And all I know is that some of them were quite adamant that they wanted their story to be told, this time, correctly. That was important, and that was a message I kept getting over and over. As I walked around Marble, I'd come home and I'd tell Doug, I keep getting these energies or something. I said, there's something that's going down through my head, down through my feet, shooting through my feet, right into the earth like it's like hungry roots of a wildflower. It's just everywhere I walked, I just felt this. And I just felt like I'm supposed to be here for some reason. And so along with that, I kept hearing in my mind, which I was beginning to wonder about now, go to the elders. Go to the elders. So I picked up at the time the Marble Redstone phone book, which was about that thick. And I said, okay, I gave it to a new friend of ours there, and I said, okay, I'm going to read off some names here, and you tell me who the old people are, I'm going to go talk to them. And that's how it started. Over the years, I'd visit with folks, I'd listen and record their stories about marble and redstone and all the way down the valley. And at the time, I really had no intention, I had no goal, I had no focus other than I was supposed to get their stories. Figured out later, yes. And each time I would hear from all of them about their love for this valley and how it was at their time when they were here, how this valley looked. And I would listen and I would record their stories, and when they said there about this, about the stories that they would tell me, quite a lot of times there were conflicts, of course. And the ones that they were always concerned about were the ones with the less than altruistic plans for the valley. And it sounds like from what we've heard here, that hasn't stopped yet, has it? Lots of times the stories that I heard in Marble were part and parcel of Carbondale. Because we all come here, whether we're in Marble or Redstone or Satank or whatever, we all come to Carbondale for our gas, for our food, for our entertainment, and seeing our friends. It's the best place to be with our friends. So I met a number of the descendants here too, and they also shared their stories and their memories and a lot of their personal photos with me. 2 books worth, and as a matter of fact, which are back there. Memoirs of a River Up the Crystal. Turned out Volume 1 and Volume 2. And it's ironic because Volume 1, the first chapter about the first people, was written after I had already met all the people that took up Volume 1 and Volume 2, was when I first met Clifford Duncan. And Clifford came from at least 4 generations of spiritual elders before him. And when I met him and we got to know each other, eventually I was asked to be a travel assistant for him. And we would drive all over, driving, flying, wherever it took us on different trips. And I remember I called Singing Bear and told him about it. And he said, oh, well, that's quite an honor. You know, he said, the youths up there might like you, after all. So Clifford and I spent several years working together over here before he passed. He always impressed upon me how important it was to save our stories, every one of us. And I made sure that we recorded and filmed him as often as possible. And I was very humbled and honored to get to travel with him to participate in the spiritual ceremonies and things like that he would go to, both around here and also abroad. But the greatest honor for me was to proudly witness, right here in Carbondale, the coming back of the Indian and the white man. And that's when I got Clifford Duncan, who's the great-great-grandson of the last of the Ute families that lived here, to meet LaRon Thompson, great-grandson, and one of the first settler families that lived here. And it turned out his family, his people, were here before the Utes were even removed. And when I got them together, they both talked about childhood memories that they had heard about their early days, and stories that they had heard, and how they both felt the same, very same about this land, how much it meant to them. So when they shook hands, to my mind, that was the beginning of one serious major ancestral healing. Clifford said to the folks in Carbondale at that time, "We are the same, you and I. Once this land belonged to us. Now it belongs to you. And it's up to you how you take care of it. And yes, I got it, that I was meant to bring them together and to make sure that I continued to tell their stories. Anyway, the stories go on and on. Even since I've come back up here, I still hear stories from people nearly every day. In fact, when we were first invited to come to Marble for this summer, I kept hearing voices then telling me, stories, stories, gotta find the stories, stories. And lo and behold, where do I find myself? In the best of company. Bottom line, I am so grateful to have been called here to this valley, and I'm so blessed to have made the connections with the kind of strong women that I have, like these ladies right here with me this afternoon. Yes, we are all here for a reason. Think about it for yourself. What is the reason that you're here for this valley? Because I'll leave you with this one thing. My favorite Ute word, which is like one of the easiest probably to sound out, and I spell it phonetically, na-na-ma, all together as one. Creator, nature, we learn from nature, and woman. Thank you.
I'd like to close our evening together with a poem that Charlotte has shared with me, sourced from the Southern Ute Cultural Museum. The Ute Circle of Life. My moccasins are new and smell of fresh buckskin. They are tight and strong, for life is a great journey, a sacred path, and the circle awaits me. The circle is a whole. The circle is life. It is surroundings. It is time. The circle is me, and the circle is you. There are 4 colors within, 4 directions, 4 seasons, and 4 life stages. This is the circle of life. My moccasins are new, and the circle awaits me. My moccasins are torn and tattered, and their beads are falling off, for life is a constant journey. I have seen many things. It seems I have lived many lives within the circle. And now I make new moccasins for my grandchildren, for life is a constant journey. Spring will return after winter. Grass will grow once more, the birds return to sing, and the sun will rise on a new day. The elders pass on their knowledge, on to another generation. Renewal. The circle never ends and never will. This is the circle of life. Thank you.
Voices Summertime Stories and Music, Herstory. Please keep relating yourself to and be a part of the Carbondale Historical Society because we are what the future of Carbondale will look like. Please tune in to KDNK every second Friday from 6 to 7 p.m. for Voices Radio Hour. This episode will be aired on August 11th. Please join us too for our part 2 of the Voices Summertime Stories and Music up in Aspen on August 26th. We have to bring the Carbondale way up there. And also, please join us on October 20th, 21st, and 22nd for the Northlas Voices in Tekal. My name is Mitsu Wu. I'm the Executive and Artistic Director for Voices. Thank you so much, and we will see you at the next community gathering. Thank you.